Okay, I'd like to welcome everybody tonight to the Sherborn Select Board meeting on August 10th, 2022. And I'm calling the meeting to order at 6:45 p.m. As most of you know, we're using some new technology, and so I'm just asking you to be mindful that we may have some glitches. We're broadcasting via YouTube live streaming and Comcast, and I don't think Fios is available yet. We also have participants via Zoom and in the room. So I'd like to ask the town administrator, please read the agenda.
Good evening. So after I read the agenda, the select board can vote to amend or approve the agenda. There'll be a public comment section starting at 7 p.m. Executive session is at 6:45 and is pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 38, Section 21A and 8 to discuss the town administrator search process. At 7 p.m. starts the interview of the town administrator candidate, and before us tonight is William Chennard. After he speaks, there will be a time for deliberation and discussion and a consideration of an offer of employment.
Thanks very much, Diane. Are there any motions relative to the agenda? And yes, I do have a motion. In consultation with town council today, they had originally advised us to hold this executive session, but they decided that in the interest of abundance of caution, we should no longer hold the planned executive session at the start of the meeting. So therefore, I'm moving that we accept the agenda as amended by removing the executive session. Do I have a second for that motion? Second. And so all in favor of changing the agenda and accepting it?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you, Jeff.
4-0. So that's what we'll do. It is now 6:45 on the dot, so we'll now take a recess until 7 o'clock p.m., which is when the open session with the interview will start. So I apologize for the brief delay, but there was a change in plans today. And now phase two. I want to thank everybody for bearing with us where we had a brief recess. Hopefully everyone can hear me all right. As the agenda points out, our main purpose tonight is to interview one more person in the town administrator search. And so the candidate tonight is Bill Chennard, who we will interview for 30 minutes. And as I mentioned last week, in case there were people that weren't here last week, I reached out to all the town department heads to request questions from them that I could ask on their behalf if there are additional questions they wanted to hear answered from the candidates. So what I'll do is I'll intersperse those questions with other select board questions during the interview process. So I'd like to welcome Bill Chennard to the meeting, please.
I think Jeannie just went downstairs to get him, so it might be a minute.
Jeff, when we start the questions, can I ask one procedural question of the witness?
Sure, but let's wait till they get here, do you think?
Oh, yeah.
I don't think it should be called a witness. I think it's an interviewee.
Did I say witness?
Yes.
I put them in the protection program.
That's, I'm a lawyer.
I know.
Deal with-
We're aware of that.
With witnesses. Sorry about that.
Are you ready?
Yeah,
All right.
sure.
Hi, folks. You've seen this gentleman before, Bill Chennard. Bill is a neighbor, resident of Natick, and the town manager in Pembroke.
That's correct.
Bill Chennard.
Hello, everyone. Good to see everyone again, or at least most of you again.
Welcome, Bill. Just so you know, the setup with our crazy high technology tonight, it's a little glitchy because we haven't had an in-person meeting since last week, was our first one in 2.5 years. So we have, we're broadcasting on Comcast, we're broadcasting on YouTube Live, and we've got around 18 people at home on Zoom, and then the people in the room here. So that's what we're doing technology-wise. There may be some glitches, but it seems to be working okay, and most people can hear us and are aware of it. So before we start, I think Paul wanted to ask a question. Is that what you said before we
Yes,
start?
yeah, just one procedural question. Because we did the interviews of the other two last week, I wanted to ask you whether you have reviewed or watched or otherwise learned about what they said and what questions were asked.
I, unfortunately, the last week have not had time, so I hope you're not expecting that I would have, but I unfortunately have not.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, I don't know, Bill, do you want to give us maybe like a brief intro? We only have 30 minutes in this session, an in-person session, so, but if you want to give us a little bit of an intro, because some people haven't met you.
Sure. So I will keep it quick. I know many of you have met me and heard, or at least reviewed my resume. I've been in municipal government for a couple of decades. Prior to that, I flew for the U.S. Air Force, flew KC-135s, and progressed through that for a number of years, and then decided I would go into government. Worked in the assessing office for a while, have worked in just about every job in municipal government over my career at one point or another. I worked for Natick for several years. The city of Newton recruited me. I went to work for the city of Newton for a few years, I think about 7 years, and then Natick said, hey, we're looking for a business manager, will you come back? And I said, yes. And then my career grew from there. Went from business manager, believe it or not, to a DPW director for a few years. They were looking to change things up there. And then was a deputy town administrator for a significant amount of time in Natick. And obviously, you know, as Buzz just said, I'm currently the town manager with the town of Pembroke. So education-wise, a number of...
We've read your CV.
Yeah, okay, so we'll leave that. And you know, it's exciting. I mean, I'm excited to to have this opportunity with Sherborn.
Excellent, thank you. So, does
You
one
want
of
to
the
start? Go
select
ahead,
board members
Marion.
want to start with a question? Have a question, Marion?
Sure, I could. Thanks for coming back, first of all. You know, the Boston region, I don't have to tell you, is undergoing a lot of change. And the towns around Boston are all part of that ecosystem. But the towns are all different and are responding differently to the change and have different challenges and different opportunities in the face of the change happening in the whole region. Could you foresee with us what opportunities you might see for Sherborn as the population increases and the environment changes in Boston, opportunities or challenges?
Yeah, so there are both with Sherborn. You know, you're predominantly a residential based community, very, very limited commercial with very limited ability to expand the commercial. Although you do have a master plan, it's a couple of years old now, that allows you to do that actual expansion and gives you a pathway to that as long as we follow that and adjust it where necessary. So I think there is potential for growth. I always use a term, what I call the right growth. You know, a mall in Sherborn isn't the right growth, but a lot of smaller opportunities up and down Route 27 and potentially in some other areas of the town are likely the right growth. I think as the Metro West and Boston change, you know, my take on Sherborn is we want the right growth, or I shouldn't say we, I don't live here, but you want the right growth. Hopefully it's a we, but we'll wait and see what happens with that. And the residents want the right growth, so we need to look at that side of it. As far as the tax base, there are challenges there. You know, Proposition 2.5 obviously created challenges for every community. And one thing that I see is the affordability for both seniors and young people in all communities throughout the region. You know, the state senate and the state house of representatives have taken some steps to help communities with that. I mean, Sherborn should partner with our neighbors and look to the state for all of those opportunities. I know I've been working on a committee with a state senator in Pembroke for several months now, where we meet on a regular basis, and we're working toward regional growth in housing and regional abilities. You know, 40Bs are not always the answer. 40B program works, but it's not necessarily the right answer for every community, but some regionalization in that, where especially those communities such as Sherborn and Pembroke, for that matter, that have challenges with your sewer systems. If you can regionalize that with other communities and maybe even change the 40B statute so you get the affordable housing that people are craving for, especially the elderly and the young.
Thank you.
Jeff, do you want to go ahead?
George,
Yeah, go ahead. I will. I just wanted to ask you about, in your role as a supervisor, how you've dealt with turnover, some successes and challenges, and I guess especially in your role in particular, when you took over as town manager in Pembroke, which was recent, how the turnover situation was.
Yeah, so when I took over, we had not that many vacancies, to be honest. We have had a few. We've had some retirements. We've had some people leave for other jobs. One of the things about municipal government, it used to be able to draw because of the benefit packages that were out there in municipal government, the retirement packages and all of that. Those benefit packages, healthcare has changed over the last even 10 years, 20 years especially, and what municipal government offers, it's relatively comparable to what the private sector is offering now. So it is a challenge to recruit. We are currently, you must be looking at my website in Pembroke, because we have been recruiting for custodial staff, we've been recruiting for water department staff, and staff for our recreation department. We run a pretty robust after-school program, and we've had some significant challenges in hiring those folks. We're actually having a job fair. We're working with the local community colleges, with some of the high schools, and we're going to have a job fair in the next 3 weeks to try and recruit that and fill those positions. We've changed some of our recruiting practices where we're working with recruiters. We never did that in Pembroke, never had to. There was a line out the door, people applying for those jobs. So it's not impossible to get people, but it's more challenging because it's more competitive out there.
So I guess on that note, what are your strategies to retain good people so they don't go to the competitors that are looking for?
Yeah, so it's about respect. I mean, you have to. One thing that I have done when I got there, most of the collective bargaining agreements, and I know Sherborn doesn't have huge staff in collective bargaining agreements, but that doesn't matter. The theory that I'm going to talk about is the same for every staff member, and you have to be competitive. You have to have an environment where people feel that respect and want to come to work every day. I mean, municipal jobs, that's the other thing that's changed in municipal government. People used to have tremendous respect for municipal government, and that trust level that government automatically had 15 years ago is more of a distrust level, and you have to earn that trust. You have to earn that trust with your residents, you have to earn that trust with your employees, your staff, and you have to earn that trust with your boards and committees. And one way to do that, in my opinion, is transparency. Make sure your salaries are competitive. Do the salary studies. We did salary studies in just about every single category in Pembroke to make sure we were competitive. Make sure that your benefits are somewhat competitive with your neighbors. And other things you can do is mentor the staff that you have. You'd likely have huge amount of staff here in the town of Sherborn. Not huge, because nobody has huge staff in municipal government anymore. But you have a significant number of staff that have been here a long time that you can mentor and train to become and backfill those other positions that are above them. I think that's key. I did that in Natick. I'm doing that in Pembroke now, so that when you have to hire somebody, you can at first look from within, and then you can bring in at the lower levels and train them into those positions. So you don't have to find somebody that is a department head that has the experience. You promote, educate, mentor, and promote from within so that you can fill at the lower levels and then do the same, educate, mentor, and promote from within.
Thank you.
George, listen to me. Paul, would you have a question you'd like to ask?
No, but I'm hoping you're going to ask that question about,
I have several to ask. I don't know which one you're
The
thinking
first
of.
one that you started with.
All
the-
right, let me try. Let me see if I'm able to read your mind here.
the one about how would you characterize
Yes,
yourself?
exactly. So this is a leadership style question. What is your strongest suit? And this came from a department head in town. What is your strongest suit? Listening, motivation, or organization? Please pick just one and explain why. And once again, it's listening, motivation, or organization.
So I think, first of all, I know it's difficult to say just do one,
Yeah.
because all three are critically important. But I would argue that if you're not a good listener, then you're not hearing what's going on out there, and you're going to fail. So if I have to say one, which I'm reluctant to do, to be honest, because I think they all have a key role, I think. But to start with, if you're not a good listener and you don't hear what people say, and I say that way on purpose, because there have been people that I've sat in meetings with that were potentially listening to me, but weren't hearing what I'm saying. You need to have that skill set to not only listen, and there are times, I will tell you, I'm a multitasker. There are times where I'm looking at my computer and in a meeting and trying to do 100 things at once. But you have to pick the times where it's absolutely important that you need to focus and look at that person and understand what that person is saying to you. Because as a leader, if you don't hear them, you're failing. In those other two categories, organization is probably my weakest category, although I'm very organized, but I have a stack of papers on my desk. And my staff always laughs at me, but then when they come to look for something, I'll say, okay, well, it's the third thing down, and here you go. So I do a good job with organization, I do a good job with listening, but I think to be successful overall, listening is the most important.
Okay. Second question, what has been your experience interacting with land use boards, including zoning boards of appeal, boards of health, planning board, conservation commissions, and how do you see their role in managing a town?
So those boards are all critical. I mean, it's my opinion that there's a lot of boards and committees, not necessarily in Sherborn, because you don't have 90 boards and committees here. In Pembroke, we have a significant number of boards and committees that we don't need. And I have actually said that. Your land use boards, you absolutely need. You need them for many reasons. Planning board to make sure that there's a statutory requirement, make sure that they follow through with that. The ZBA, again, another statutory requirement, and absolutely a necessary board to make sure that your local zoning ordinances are indeed followed. If your enforcement officer, I don't know if it's a member of your ZBA, probably more likely a building department employee. Conservation Commission, again, wetlands and state legal requirements. So all of those boards have a critical role, and I think that they are the management, quote unquote, experts with guidance from professional staff. I pride myself in understanding Mass General Law. I'll tell you a very quick story because I know we have limited time. I made a huge mistake in an interview once where I asked someone else about all kinds of statutory stuff and they had no clue. And this was my favorite guy from the resumes, and he absolutely bombed the interview because of the questions I asked. So it's important to know that. But I pride myself in understanding what the statutes are and working with those boards. It is, they don't necessarily need guidance from the town administrator, but they need to know the town administrator is there to support them when they need help at something, whether it's interfacing with staff or even maybe a citizen who is angry with them and needs the town administrator to communicate that.
I think it's important too, the integration, because they're all independent bodies, but if you're looking at a 40B proposal in town, you've got an integrated perspective across those different boards and how they fit in the process.
Yeah, so, obviously 40B is the lead board, is the ZBA on that, but it's my opinion, and if someone looks at a 40B that we're going through with Pembroke right now, my first recommendation to the Zoning Board of Appeals is to not just take it on yourself, reach out to the planning board and ask for their opinion, ask for certain things. 40Bs, if you're not at that 10% number, can be an incredible challenge, but if those boards work together, you can turn potentially an unfriendly 40B into a friendly 40B.
You have a question, Marion?
I have one that's kind of related, but this is a question about your role in Pembroke, actually. As you know, Pembroke has been planning to install a newly designed community center for years now. and the estimate of what that's going to cost has gone all over the place, up and down. Your last town meeting, the town approved 19 million, Prop 2.5 override to fund it. But of course, the environment keeps changing. Now, I don't know what the estimate is now. In June, I think it was up to 22 million, and I forget where I got all this information. It was probably on your website. But as town manager and overseer of the budget, can you describe what role you've played in shaping the town's decisions on this huge project? I mean, I know that it's up to boards and committees and town meeting, people of the town, but certainly a lot of coordination and foresight is in order, and you have a lot of financial and planning background, so I'm wondering what your role has been, even though you inherited it.
Yeah,
Came in midstream, but
I certainly
still.
did inherit it and come in midstream on that one. And to be
Makes
honest,
it more challenging, of course.
they had
but
been
still.
planning that thing for over 20 years. And there were some strategic errors, I guess I would call them more tactical errors, in the budgeting process. They hired a consultant, but they did it on the cheap to review the environmental impacts of the existing building. And they came back and said, it's a couple $100,000 to abate it. Well, indeed, it's $1.5 million to abate it after we dug into that in depth. So one thing that I have done is say we need to plan better as a community, and we need to make sure that we cover all those bases. And, Pembroke, similar to Sherborn, doesn't have all of that expertise on staff. So you have to make sure that you hire the right consultants and review the consultant's qualifications so that you can get the guidance from the consultants. So that's what we did. We actually brought on a new owner's project manager, and we're working through that process. We have a big meeting on the 23rd to discuss next steps and to show the residents what happened. I mean, clearly the environmental impact was one piece, but simply the environment out there for bidding public projects is a major component of that right
Yeah.
now.
So your role has been like to advise hiring a consultant, or?
So my role has been the community's lead, working with the consultant group. We meet every Thursday morning. I'll be there tomorrow morning early and meeting with that group along with the key stakeholders within our community. Bringing the boards and committees together that we needed to get approvals from, that need to understand the process, the select board, the planning board, the conservation, well, no, we didn't end up needing conservation, but the Historic District Commission, and working with the consultants to make sure that everybody did. And then the key two boards, or key two organizational parts of our structure, are the Council on Aging and the Recreation Department, because those are the two groups that are going to occupy this building as the primary tenants. So, we took a look at, what is the programming? What are we planning? We're rolling out, as I said, on the 23rd, so the residents can understand, because there is an additional ask.
Now, are you part of the long-term plan to foresee the financial impacts on the town over the next 10 years?
Yeah, so what I did, I always like to use the word we because I don't do anything in a vacuum typically. What we did was we took a look at the debt structure and programmed that out so we knew where our debt was going. We borrowed at the exact right time on the 19 million. We got 1.8% over the lifetime of the bonding, which is really good. And we're not a AAA community in Pembroke, we're a AA. So that was exceptionally good interest rates. We planned that piece out. We also worked on and did a study on programming and costs of the building. You know, what staff are we going to need for the building? Identify what additional staff, because that's an additional cost. So we did the cost component, and then we did the revenue component. And we actually worked with a consultant as a specialist in this. So you can understand, there is a revenue component and there's a cost component, and we have a 5-year projection of exact costs, and then we have an additional 5 years of where we think it's going to be. It's difficult on these buildings to project out beyond that 5-year term, but we've actually tried to do that, and it's almost a 30,000 square foot building, and the 5-year cost it ranges from a high of 105 in year one, because there's a lot of costs in year one, down to 95,000 additional cost from where the budget is
So
today.
you led the coordination of all of that, or
I did.
or what? Okay.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Okay. One question people have asked me, and I know it was asked in the search committee, because I was on the search committee too, but there's people who were concerned that, you know, you've only been 2 years or roughly that in Pembroke, so they're sort of wondering what made you decide that you wanted to pursue another opportunity at this time.
Sure. You know, Pembroke's great. I love Pembroke. Don't misunderstand. I'm not running away from anything. In fact, they are just voted to renew my contract if I decide to stay. I know there's a few people there that aren't excited that I'm here tonight, to be honest. I don't have any issues, and they don't have any issues with me. I mean, they gave me a big raise starting July 1, and, you know, have voted to renew the contract, and, you know, we're kind of in negotiations pending upon what happens here. So nothing issue. The issue was when I took the job, which is 2 years, 3 months ago, we had planned to move there. And my wife has a job where she could have transferred. COVID hit. They closed that office down there, and so we're still here in Natick. Didn't move there, and one of the things that has motivated me to leave Pembroke, because I typically have a long tenure in positions, if you look at my resume clearly, is the shorter commute. The commute is absolutely destroying me. There are days where I will leave in the morning and it will take me 90 minutes to 2 hours to get there, and I just can't do a 12-hour day with an hour and a half commute on each end of that. And if it's a 12-hour day, it's not an hour and a half at the back end, it's an hour, but it's still a long, very, very long day. I mean, my wife said to me the other day, she goes, I don't see you much anymore. And that's kind of a unique thing. She said, you leave early in the morning, and you come home late at night, and she works overnights. So there are times where I will go 5 days in a week without seeing her, because I leave before she gets home from work, and she leaves before I get home from work. So we decided when Sherborn came up that I took a look to see if Sherborn would be a fit for me. We took a look at 3 or 4 different opportunities, and I didn't apply for anywhere but here. So I felt this was a good fit, not without its challenges as I see them, but certainly something that I think I can rise to.
Okay. I'll give you another department head question. As a new TA, what would you do first? Is there a department, for example, is there a department that you would concentrate initially, or what would be your initial steps?
Yeah, so the answer to would I concentrate on a department initially? No, I don't think I would. As a new TA, I call it my look, listen, and learn tour. I think you have to walk through the door, take a look at where things are at. I mean, Sherborn, from the outside, is a really well-run community. You have a lot going for you. So take a look at what's going on, listen to people. Talk to the boards and committees, talk to the select board, talk to staff, listen to what's going on. And we talked about listening here, so I won't get into that again, but and then, start to take a look at where changes might be needed. The board may have some ideas of where they want to make changes. Department heads may have some ideas of where they want to make changes. I don't anticipate that there'll be dramatic changes. I mean, I would look for best practices. If we look at MMA, there's some significant literature out there on best practices. I think we're probably already doing them here. But look at those best practices, listen to the staff and boards and committees, get to know them, and then as things progress, start to say, hey, what about this if we do this, and plan that out. And you know, there'll be changes over time, but I wouldn't anticipate major changes early on. I think you have to learn as a new leader or manager what the operation is.
Okay. So I have one final question from department head, then maybe if you want to give us any sort of closing comments after that. So this is sort of about town development. The question is, how would you balance the needs of all residents? We know that schools and education are an integral part of the community, but as the population shifts, older adults are now becoming part of the majority. How do you ensure that all ages are represented and provided the services they need?
Yeah, that's not unique to Pembroke. I mean, there are communities that are doing the opposite of that, where there's tremendous, where the seniors have moved out of town, and there's tremendous influx of young families, and it's creating a burden on the schools somewhat. That's not the case here. I mean, Sherborn, if you look at the 2020 census, is relatively older than a lot of your neighbors. So you do have to, again, you got to balance that and budget appropriately. I had a colleague that used to say, you know, a budget represents the values of the community. And I took that to heart, because a budget should represent the values of the community. And the only way to do that is to understand where that community wants to go. What are those values? I can't sit here tonight and tell you what they are, but I can certainly tell you that, you know, if I am selected for the position over the next year, we'll do some exercises where we'll figure out what those values are, and we'll start to wrap our budget around those items. And budget is going to be a challenge. Proposition 2.5, and with 90% of your tax base coming from taxes, it's going to be a challenge. But having said that, what we can do is what I talked about before, is work with our legislative partners and begin to communicate with them aggressively about partnering with our neighbors to bring the resources necessary for all of those groups. You know, housing is going to be a big one as you know, seniors age out of their bigger homes, and young people come into looking for homes. Metro West is incredibly expensive, and we as an organization need to take whatever steps we can. We don't have all of the resources here, but certainly that we can work with our state partners to get those resources.
I think you have one more question, Marion?
Yeah, only if there's time.
No, go ahead.
It's not
So-
a crucial one, but I'm interested in this. Tell us have you joined any commissions or boards or activities at the state level? And if so, can you tell us about that?
So historically, I've been on a number of different boards and commissions during my career. Currently, the only one that I'm working on is what I referenced earlier with Senator Moran and the housing. She has a commission within Plymouth and Barnstable counties where she's looking at affordable housing and how we can do affordable housing without the traditional 40B, where, you know, a number of communities partner together, where the state supports that and brings state funding to those types of projects. And, you know, with the ARPA funds and some of the other stuff, and I'm not talking about the individual ARPA funds that come to the cities and towns, because there's some planning process around that, but the state has their component also, and those funds can help out a great deal with sewer or septic or treatment type programs to help get those in place. So historically, I've been on a number of boards and committees. Right now, I didn't think it was fair to the town of Pembroke. As you noted, I've only been there 2 years, 3 months. So, but I thought participating in that one was important.
Good, so do you want to have a chance for any closing comments that you might have?
Well, just to say, you know, I did my research. I'm not looking, I'm not out there throwing my resume around. I want to be here or in Pembroke if that's the case, but I do think I'm a good fit. I know the two other candidates, and I think I'm a better fit. I'm sure that they would tell you they're a good fit too, as I said before. So Other than that, I don't have any closing comments. If I may, I do have a couple of questions for you, if we have time. If not,
Absolutely, yes.
okay. One thing I noted, you made some structural changes to your assessing office, and you were hiring assessors. How is that process going, and is it going to preclude any of the certifications for new growth and tax rate?
Probably, I would say we're in the early stages of that. We just voted, they previously were appointed and now
Right.
we're hiring them. So I don't know that I can answer that right now, but I think it's in process to hire the right people, and I think we have some candidates, but I don't know.
They're coming forward on the August 25th meeting or the first meeting in September.
Yeah, so we're,
Okay,
you
so,
know,
Just starting the process,
we're
right?
implementing that now.
all
yeah.
right, and the appointed assessors are going to remain in place through that process? Is that the plan?
Yes.
Okay, so you shouldn't have any issues there then. Good.
Yeah, I think.
I just want to make sure we can set a tax rate and collect some taxes.
Yeah, no, I think we are aware of that priority also.
So, second question, I'm going to just share something real quick. Obviously, there's a number of people that are interconnected out there, and I've had 7 different people reach out to me about this job when it became public that I was looking at this. And they said, "Are you aware of the challenges there?" I said, "Well, yeah, same challenges everybody else has, financial and new growth and all of that." I guess my question is, are there any challenges that I don't know about that I likely should know about coming into this?
Well, you probably saw one when you drove in the driveway. That's been a challenge for us for the last
Well, we've almost,
eight
we're
years.
very close on that. He's referring to our library project.
Yeah, I saw your agenda for tomorrow evening,
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
library
we-
project's been
so.
the
We
bane of our
fired
existence for a
we
long
fired
time.
the contractor, and we had the performance bond travelers take over the project, and we fired the owner's project manager. So municipal jobs are hard because you can only hire the least qualified bidder, as you know better than I do, and the word qualified is hard to define. So anyway, yeah, we're close to completion now, but it's been much longer and more expensive than we thought. Other things, we're challenged by 40Bs because the problem with Sherborn is we have no public water supply. So most other towns are looking at 40B and trying to figure out, community needs and impacts, but we're trying to figure out, septic and water supply and conservation issues with 40Bs. And also with the new MBTA communities, we're challenged by, they want us to build a large number of, we're sort of I forget what they call it, Paul can tell you, adjacent MBTA communities.
Right,
So we're not,
same as Pembroke.
we're not Natick, where we've got train stations, several train stations and that kind of thing. So-
Unfortunately, you're close enough.
Yes, so I think that the state will maybe come to their senses, but right now they haven't done so.
I
that we're
I am
aware of.
intimately familiar and actually dealing with that right now, working with council and the planning board to come up with the legislation in the town of Pembroke that will, because we are indeed also an adjacent community,
Yep.
so.
So I think your answer is right, though. I mean, these are some of the challenges, but we're not unique in facing those. We always have challenging capital projects and road projects, which is
Yeah,
par for the
everywhere.
course.
So-
Everyone has that. Our schools are in pretty strong shape, so that's currently, a very big asset in town. Besides needing a few school roofs to be replaced, we're pretty good there, too.
I think they're
So,
just finishing up the middle school.
I
one
know,
over there.
I know.
I'm
So
driving over to that parking lot.
we're
every
doing
day,
a
so-
lot of energy. We have a sustainability coordinator now. We're now doing a lot of looking at energy projects, solar projects at different locations. So that's kind of a hot focus, and not just in the town buildings, but doing things to encourage residents to look at air source heat pumps and electric vehicles and all those kind of things that are impactful to the community and will maybe not save the town money, but save the residents money. And we're also doing a community choice aggregation plan for electric power. So we're trying to do the things that we think, will contribute to the long-term success of both the town finances and the residents' finances as well, so.
And trying to find opportunities, like you mentioned, for shared services with neighboring communities. Our chiefs just are finishing the process of going to a regional dispatch, which is gonna be very good for our town. So, looking for opportunities like that than trying to hire.
I hope you're taking advantage of the big grants for that.
We are.
Very, very good.
Thank you very
deal,
much.
Let's say that.
I appreciate the opportunity, and even if you don't select me, good luck.
Yep.
That's, it is I don't know if I want to be in your shoes, so,
Well, thank
Well,
you.
thanks for coming back. We appreciate it.
thank you.
Okay, how does the board feel? Do you want to take a 5-minute break, or do you want to just go right to
Let's just go.
deliberations? Everyone's okay with that? All right, so as you know, we've concluded our in-person interviews of all 3 candidates now, and we can discuss the 3 finalists, so who would like to start?
Do you want to start with, I think, I just want to mention, I think we need to, before we have any motions, I think let's have a chance to discuss.
Yep.
I think, take a break on any motions until we've had a chance to really have a hearty discussion amongst the 4 of us.
That's fine.
Sounds good, George. Thanks.
So,
Yeah, I agree.
Who wants to start?
well, I think another thing I would like to mention, I think just because it is in a public setting, I think to be fair to the 3, I think we had 3 good candidates and they came in and talked about their strengths. I mean, there are challenges with some, but I think to focus mainly on the strengths of candidates, I think is a fair thing to do for them, especially since these are in a public setting. And I'll start off with, our first interview was with Jeremy Marcette, and I felt like he brought a good energy to the room. He was excited about the job. He had some really good answers. He understood our big strength being our open space. He recognizes the challenges of the MBTA community issues. I liked that he brought up ideas about shared services for COA with the neighboring Medfield. He does come from larger towns employment-wise with Framingham and Natick, but I think he brings a lot of great experience from his experience on the boards in Medfield as the chair of their finance committee. Medfield, I feel like, is a very similar community to us, and I think there's a lot of strengths from his experience on that side.
So would you rather do one candidate at a time? Do you want to have other people?
I think we can kind of,
Or what order would make the most sense?
Maybe each of us do their kind of overview, like George just did, of all 3, so we can get a sense of how you balance out the
Okay.
3. And then I'll do the same. Does that make sense?
So
Yeah.
in other words, George would do
I'll
the
just go
other
with
2
all
now?
3 candidates, and then we'll each kind
Yeah,
of,
then we can come back and,
okay,
and
that makes
spend
sense.
more time on each
That's
if we
fine by
like.
me.
Yep. With the second candidate, Tim O'Leary, I think he's familiar with more regional stuff. He's very, he gave some good answers about, he's familiar with everything that's going on regionally. He brings a really good finance background. He has experience with real estate development. He's very analytical. I think his financial analysis could be strong. So those were the positive notes. Then on Mr. Chennard, he brings 20 years of municipal experience, which I think is a very good thing for him. He has some very good general strategies, I think, for towns of this size. I think I didn't hear a ton of specifics, but he's very familiar with the issues that I think surround a town of our size. So,
Let me ask you a quick question of the whole group. So you went through the positives. I have some positives for each candidate and some negatives for each.
Yeah,
So
and I
are
think-
you suggesting? If
I just
do
think we got to be
make it
careful.
positive-
Be careful with negatives that you're not going after anybody's character or.
Well, I'm going after people's leadership style and experience.
That's
That's relevant, I
yep.
think, but would we be useful for us, what I'm asking, to have each of us go through the positives and then circle another round through and go with what we think are shortcomings of a candidate, or do you want to do the candidate in their entirety?
I'd kind of like each of us to get a balance
More
on
balance?
each candidate.
Okay.
I'd like to
I can
hear.
I can go back. I'll finish with mine then if you'd like. I mean,
That's what I would prefer.
So
Okay.
you would do have one person review all of their comments on each candidate, positive and negative. Is that what you're saying?
Buzz has a suggestion.
Point of order, we recommend, and highly recommend, you stick to the positives on the candidates. And just for information, sometimes the group, there may be people that you actually do not want to talk about. Perhaps there's somebody, you want to eliminate. Perhaps there's somebody you want to talk about more. And then maybe there's somebody in the middle. But if there's somebody you actually don't, want to consider, make that known, and then move on to the positive characteristics of the people that you really want to talk about.
That makes sense.
TV, remember, and this is a public meeting, so I just urge you to stick to the positives with these candidates, please.
Well, I don't see how we could do that, Buzz, to
Oh,
be honest
well,
with
the
you, because-
positives are different for each one.
And you said,
so
and
it's-
as you said, I mean, I think it's clear when you give a lot of positives about somebody and less positives about another, you don't need to talk about,
Well, I think there's shortcomings that I think we need to bring up in each candidate, in my view.
Well,
So do you want to go ahead and finish, George, or?
I think I've said what I've wanted to say. I mean, I think I made a lot of very positive comments about Jeremy Marset, and I think he brings a lot of strengths to the position.
You want to go next, Marion?
Sure. I'll try to take them in order. I wanted to, I don't know if this is the time, but I wanted to say a little bit about what my thinking has been over the last week in general. I've done a lot of internal brain due diligence and gotten, I think, a lot more sense of these candidates than I did before out of reading their essays carefully and in detail, which I hadn't done as well before. And so then I stepped back and thought a lot about the town and our town hall and the people we have in place and how it works. So everything I say is sort of on that background. In general, some of my criteria, I should let you know, are partly, I think the candidates should be articulate, should be intelligent, should be able to read people, and be a really good listener. They're the face of the town to the region and other towns and to neighboring communities. So I think that they be articulate and well-spoken is important. They should be able to write a good letter because we ask them to do that quite a lot. On day-to-day management style, as we all know, the staff in Town Hall have really stepped it up and kept things going quite well, even without an effective town manager and then without a town manager or town administrator at all. So it's not a disaster by any means. So I think everyone would agree that the operations could be improved, but the changes and improvements should really be a collaborative effort. And so I liked two of the candidates' comments about being careful listeners and listening to what people in Town Hall have to say. So, Marset, I also have a very positive sense of Jeremy Marset. He's very active not only in the town where he works, obviously, but in his own town. You know, he volunteers. He's not strictly in engineering and DPW at all. He's very well versed in finances. He's chair of advisory in Medfield, and he's a big community participator in Medfield. And I felt he communicated really well. He's an engaging communicator. He gives you a real sense of who he is as a person. He's not cut and dried. You understand really who he is. He's low-key. He's very modest in his manner. But I consider that a positive in this environment because I think he'll engender trust in as he may want to move toward change, but he'll get people on his side first. And I did get a reference from a current select board member in Medfield who has worked with Jeremy Marset for the last 10 years on various projects. And he had nothing but good things to say. He said, actually, first-rate person, really strong ethics, great listener, and very intelligent, good to work with. So that's Marset.
Now, I don't think, you didn't comment on Bill, did you?
Well, she hasn't talked on.
I'm doing them in order. Sorry, I was a little long-winded.
Oh, no, that's fine.
Because she did doing all three like I did.
Okay, I didn't
Yeah.
hear you do Bill. So Paul, do you want to go
Well,
next?
she's got to do Tim, and she hasn't done any.
Oh, you
She only
mentioned
did
Tim.
Jeremy
You
Marset.
mentioned Tim. I
No, she
thought-
didn't.
no?
Not
Okay,
yet.
go ahead, go ahead.
Not yet.
I thought you did a little bit. Go ahead.
Well, Tim O'Leary, first I want to say that in our initial interview, in our discussion after the initial Zoom meeting, I questioned some stuff he said in his CV. I thought it was a little overblown, but then he responded with a lot of detail. And I have to say, then going back to his CV, I don't think it was overblown at all. So I just want to make sure we don't take that comment I made before into any consideration. It shouldn't influence us. So Tim O'Leary is obviously a very accomplished guy, especially in financial planning and management. One of his strengths is that he has a very strong understanding of concepts of management. He's very good at communicating that. He's an educator. I felt like I was in a business school class, and I think he would do that. And the letter of support that we got from a colleague that he supervises in Hopkinton kind of confirms that, described him as an educator on all kinds of subjects. He's coming from very big organizations. And now he's in Hopkinton, which is relatively small compared to the Coast Guard and the government, Los Alamos. So it's not surprising that he's looking for a bigger role somewhere. And I think he probably could function in a much bigger place than Sherborn quite well. So Bill Chennard, I had a sheet on him. I don't really need it. Maybe it's on me. Here we go. His last interview and his CV, I thought, was very impressive. He's got huge experience in municipal government. He's done lots of certificates in various aspects of municipal government. He's obviously kept himself up to date. And at this point, he's been in a deputy TA or TA job for now 9 years. And he's been all around the block in town government. So he definitely has already kind of been there, and he brings that experience to Sherborn. His essays that I read carefully were very brief, actually, the briefest of the three, very much to the point. His writing style is very terse, a statement of facts. He clearly understands good municipal government best practices, and he provided examples from his time in Natick and Pembroke. So those are my positives about Chennard.
Great.
Paul?
So I liked all three. So before I get into the specifics of that, I just had a procedural suggestion that after we go through all the good things, rather than a motion to appoint someone, I would suggest we rank them, each of us rank them 1, 2, and 3.
Mm-hmm.
And then we take those rankings and we look to see, did we all have the same number 1? And did we all have the same number 3? And look towards seeing if there's agreement to eliminate somebody, leaving 2, and then have that, unless there's clear unanimity across the board, but not to try and do everything in one motion.
Right.
That is kind of
That makes sense.
do
I
it
agree.
step
I
by
like
step.
that.
Yeah, I'd like to hear your, I think right now, let's do the feedback on the individuals and then get into the procedure.
Okay, I just wanted to
Thing
throw
I'll
that
say
out.
is I don't agree with that approach, and I'll explain why when I give my comments.
Okay.
Okay. As I say, I liked all 3, and the part that I liked best about each of them was their answer to that question that I had asked Jeff to ask today.
It was a good
Which
question.
is-
I can tell you who it was. I forget who gave it to me. It's a good question.
It was an excellent question. You know, how do you see yourself? And when Tim said motivator, that just struck a responsive chord with me, because I see so many people who have lost sight of what the mission is. So if the government gives you a ship and your job is to rescue people, the whole purpose is that when the call comes in, you go out and do it with enthusiasm, as opposed to, oh my God, I didn't sign up for that, that's dangerous, all that kind of stuff. I kind of loved his answer, because he bridged what's so often overlooked, which is to get people to care about their job and see its meaning and give them the motivation to do it well. Just loved that. I saw him as somebody who was willing to experiment with different ideas and present them to the Board of Selectmen. So I should remind us all that we're not appointing a town manager who's going to go out and do all these things on his own, where there is still a select board in the town. And when we hire anybody, whatever ideas they come up with, they're going to present it to us. And I saw that he would present to us the full story. We would know all the positives, and we would know all the negatives. And so the decision that we make or town meeting makes would be fully vetted, fully informed. If I could go to Jeremy next. I liked his answer about being a good listener. I believe in that. That's what I think a good selectman is. Somebody who's willing to listen, get all the information, and then act. So I love that part of what he said. I see good connections with 2 of very important neighbors that we haven't fully developed those connections, namely Natick and Medfield. It would, I think, benefit the community to do more regional stuff, and I think he had the connections and he has the ability to build on that for our community. So I saw those as really good. Plus, I liked his personality. He just seemed like a truly nice guy. And then Bill. I see Bill as stability. And I loved his answer about being a good listener, because again, for reasons already stated, I think that's That's really the thing I want for our town and our employees and the public. Some citizen comes in and is upset, I want them to get a full hearing, even if they're mad. And the same thing with an employee. If an employee is upset about something, I want a town administrator who's going to listen. But I think he has so much municipal experience that he would be able to figure out how to get things done and bring to us a dimension of great practicality that we don't necessarily have, and that would be a great contribution and asset to the community. So those are my reaction to those three candidates.
Okay, it's my turn now. So I'm going to give balanced comments, positives and negatives, because I feel that's what's required here. I'll start with Tim. Initially, I was really impressed with him when we interviewed the search committee, because we almost didn't have to interview him. He just, on so many subjects, he's so knowledgeable and almost, as you say, entertaining to a certain, you use the business school aspect, but all the different background he had, I felt was very strong, and some of it could be applied and some of it couldn't. You mentioned that he worked for large organizations. I actually see that as a downside, just because he's used to working in a large organization rather than a small entrepreneurial town where there's like one person or 1.5 person department. So I think a lot of his process management could be overkill in a small town, so I worried about that. He definitely has the intellectual, it's really a curiosity, I guess I would say. He was, exploring new things, and it really brought a lot of thought, as I think George said, to all the conditions they were facing in Hopkinton. He's looked at the well project they were going to do, and he's now decided to have them get connected to MWRA, so that was probably a change of thinking in Hopkinton. And so I think he has a lot of positives. I have major concerns with him. I think two things. One, there's high turnover when he arrived in Hopkinton. We've talked about that before, and I don't think that is entirely his fault, but I think it's partially his fault, and we specifically had questions that discussed that. So I think we have to be aware that a strong personality can also rub some people the wrong way, and you just have to be sensitive to that in leadership style. And obviously the other big concern I have is he has 2 years total of municipal experience, and none of it as a town administrator or as an assistant town administrator. So to me, that's a limitation for him. Then I would next talk about Bill. Bill is kind of interesting, and I'll honestly say I thought his interview tonight I've interviewed all three of them 3 times now. I thought his best interview was tonight, myself. I thought he did a really strong job tonight. He's a little more methodical would be the word I was used, but he's very thoughtful, and you could tell that when he got to Pembroke, he had to really, he'd been so long in Natick that it's quite a learning curve if you've already, all the department heads. So he's only been there 2 years, but he's, gotten involved in that community center project he talked about, gotten involved in other projects. He does seem like a very good listener. I felt that was a strong suit of his. I think he's probably more of a delegator than a doer, as you said, with his pile of things. I felt like he tended to delegate more, and so my sense is in a smaller town like Sherborn, the town administrator is a sort of a utility infielder, I guess they say. They delegate, but they also they're a sole contributor also. So my little concern about him is that he would have to do a lot of things and not have as much staff. We basically have a 3-person select board office, and so I think that would be a challenge for him versus having a larger Natick department. And so finally with Jeremy, I agree that his Natick experience and his Medfield volunteer experience is a strong combination. He's really personable, as you noted. He's very outgoing and collaborative, it sounds like. So I think that would be a positive. I was not pleased with his interview that we had last week when I would ask very specific questions and he would give us a 15-minute answer that wandered from here to there. I didn't feel like he was concise in his answers, and I felt he was kind of rambling. And so that concerned me. And the other thing that concerns me, to be honest, about Jeremy, although he has some Medfield experience, he's never been a town administrator or an assistant town administrator. So I find that to be something that that is kind of a no showstopper for me. So those are my summary comments. So we could go with Paul's plan, and if I may, I think I'll explain why I don't like the plan, and that is that he and I are at the other end of the table of each other, and we're at the other end of the spectrum. I cannot support any of the candidates we're considering. So I can't do a vote of 1, 2, and 3. My recommendation, which I mentioned earlier, is I think we would be better off not taking any action on these candidates and considering an interim town administrator. I know that there are retired town administrators who take these positions, and they're not looking for a long-term role. We did that with the school superintendent search. They had that search that kind of blew up, and they ended up disbanding the search, and they then launched a formal search for an interim school superintendent and hired someone, and then launched a full-term search. So my feeling is I don't think we should pick someone tonight. I think we should consider options other than just picking one of these 3 candidates.
So could I say a couple of things?
Sure.
I left out of my presentation the fact that I gave a lot of consideration to references. And we had a report from our consultants about references. But I also got information from some of my own work, and all 3 of these came back with positive recommendations. I didn't find anything that would say to me that somebody's not appropriate, there's nothing bad anywhere. It was just
I actually did the same and got the opposite outcome. I talked to someone that knows both of the Natick candidates quite well. It's not a person that lives in Natick, but they know them quite well professionally. And they both felt, that person felt that both of them would not be a strong fit with Sherborn.
So, yeah, it's very hard to interpret something like that.
This is a person that's worked with them professionally over quite a period of time. It's not a random, reference. It's someone that knows them and has interacted for a long period of time.
I had more on 2 of the candidates, or on one of the candidates in particular, Jeremy Marset. I've heard very good feedback from everybody that I've talked to about him or who knew him. He comes across, I feel like he came across last week as is. I think he just came in, like I said, with energy. I think he has fresh ideas. I think it's something that I know one of the things you mentioned was he's never been a town administrator before. We've hired a lot of people that haven't been a chief or a department head before. You got to give people a chance. If we only hired recycled town administrators, that's maybe not the best hiring practice.
Possibly, but
I wouldn't want everybody to be recycled. I think sometimes if somebody's young and has fresh ideas and really impresses you, then give them a chance.
Can I comment on that too? I agree with George. When we were discussing the termination of our previous town administrator, one of the issues that we thought about was, trying to explain how things sort of didn't go well in the end. One of the explanations that I heard from some of you guys was that, well, he was in that role for quite a long time, and maybe someone who was newer to the role and came in with a little more excitement, considered it more of a challenge. would be kind of some new blood and new energy in the role. And so just to remind you, we talked about that.
Yeah.
If I could just add to that, my daughter decided to become a teacher, and she went and got a job being a teacher. She put her heart and soul into it as a new teacher. She was doing stuff, buying stuff with such enthusiasm and such love for the kids. Whereas you have teachers who have been there for a long time, and for them it's become routine, that they're using the same plans that they used years ago. It got so during the COVID time when she would be doing classes remotely, I would be listening to it, and I wanted to be her student. She was just so excited, so energized. So the point is, I'm using that as an example that sometimes somebody who hasn't been a long-term town administrator can bring such enthusiasm, such a commitment to proving themselves that they're willing to go way beyond.
Another thing to advocate for Jeremy, I felt like he knew Sherborn. He knew what was going on here. I think he even knew that Farm Pond had been closed for a day and then was reopened again. And he knew, I talked about the fire, the open house at the fire department. He passes through the town every day, so it's probably easier for him to see what's going on here. His wife's from Dover. I think he has a connection to the town, and I think that's a very important piece to consider. One thing I forgot to mention when I was talking about him, the other thing, I asked the turnover question with all three, and Jeremy by far gave the best answer because he talked about how he had a bad hire and quickly identified it, and made a change. He wasn't afraid to make a change on that, and I think that's an important piece to consider because he's not afraid to make the decisions as well. And sometimes the worst thing you can do is sit on it and wait. So, and I think he's somebody who would take action. So yeah.
One thing, if I could, to address some of Jeff's comments. It's been 8 months since our last town administrator left. If we hired somebody today, they have to give notice. They have a process that they have to go through. I don't want to see them leave any community in the lurch. So realistically, it's going to be 9 to 10 months gap between town administrators. The second point is that I have had a fair amount of experience with hiring interim town administrators in other communities, but also in Sherborn. When you bring in an interim town administrator, they don't necessarily know much about the community. They have to go through a learning process and hopefully a listening process. So you end up essentially with a holding pattern. And if you add the 8 months to a holding pattern on an interim, again, while you're going through to try and find your permanent, you have the community essentially in a holding pattern for a long time. And I've heard from various department heads that, we're waiting for a new town administrator before we do this, or waiting for a new town administrator before we do that. Why should we all be waiting for the new town administrator? This community needs to address its challenges and move forward. Mm-hmm. And again, I would also throw in the notion that, as the quote goes, good is the enemy of perfect, or perfect is the enemy of good. That is, if you look for perfection, if you look for someone completely without fault, completely a perfect human being, not only is that probably an unachievable goal, but it forces you to overlook the good. And there are 3 good candidates here. each one of whom could add something to this town and get us moving. Which brings me to the final point that I had mentioned before. We have this probationary period built into our bylaws, and our personnel board can tell us about the probationary period. So if somebody starts and it turns out they aren't right for the town, we can fix it and easily correct it during that probationary period. So just treading water, I don't think is in the best interest of the town.
Well, we're in vehement disagreement, I guess is the way I would say. I think it's wrong to make a decision that doesn't feel right, and this doesn't feel right. None of these three am I willing to give a probationary period to. Because I want someone who knows the job, who's done this job before, and Bill's the only one that's done that. I understand your point about a new person brings enthusiasm, but I want someone that knows how you marshal a 40B project through the town. I want someone that knows how you handle all kinds of issues in the town. And I don't think someone who hasn't been at least an assistant town administrator is qualified to join Sherborn's department. I'll finish, but let me finish, thank you.
I'm not saying anything.
Yeah. So I feel quite strongly that these candidates are not ideal for Sherborn. And we had David Williams for 10 years and probably was effective for maybe 8 of the 10 years. So it's a long-term decision. It's not a probationary period decision. And I'm not going to share the comments, but the specific comments I got from the reference were not at all positive. There were major concerns about the two candidates from Natick, and I don't need to go through them. So I completely disagree with making the decision on these three candidates, but I'll let the select board make the motions. But I feel this is a wrong decision, and I know that we can find an interim town administrator who has town administrator experience. He or she may need to get up to speed on Sherborn, but they won't need to get up to speed on how to run a town. In fact, they may bring in benchmarking capabilities from other towns where they've been town administrator and bring best practices. So I completely disagree with your comments, Paul. I respect the intent of them, but I feel these candidates none of them are good.
So there's one thing you said I want to take an objection to, which is bringing up David Williams and his performance.
That's appropriate. I accept that.
He's not here to defend himself. At the end of the process, it was an amicable departure. He has a career and a family and all of that, and I'm sure the last thing he wants to encounter is a newspaper article that starts talking about
That's a very fair criticism. I apologize for making that statement. My point was, though, more so that he'd been here for 10 years. So this isn't a decision that we want to do another search 2 years from now. As you probably know, Sudbury just fired their town administrator after 2 years. Had no previous town administrator experience, and he'd previously had a different industry that he worked in, and he'd lasted 2 years with a 3-year contract.
I don't think we can take that as a real cautionary tale, because he came from a different industry.
Yes.
And, they're, completely different people, completely different situations.
True, but
But I must say, I'm finding your comment about the serious reservations about 2 of the candidates based on a recommendation just very hard to deal with, because I have no idea what you're talking about. And
I can share the details, but I don't think it's appropriate.
no, it's not appropriate, definitely not, but it puts us in a funny position, like there's a ghost out there, but we don't know.
Well, that's my job, though, is to reach out to people I know to try and gauge.
Oh, absolutely, you're
To
right.
get references and engage them, so that's what I did. And this is not a random person. This, someone knows them and their leadership style extremely well.
One thing to say on that is, I think when you get recommendations from people or feedback from people, a few of us had other feedback from other people too that was very, very positive.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you've got to take it all collectively. You
That's
can't
true.
take one recommendation and just say, oh, this one person didn't work well with them or heard bad things about them, because you know
Yeah.
what? There's probably people that work here in town that one person 10 people would give them rave reviews, and one person had a bad run-in with them and would say terrible things about them.
This is a different circumstance.
No,
but
I know,
take
but
your
I'm saying you've got to take the whole picture and consider, yes, there's gonna be negatives. Yes, somebody might ramble on, as Paul said, nobody's gonna be perfect.
point. Okay.
So
So-
that's, I think, we gotta take it all into account. I agree. I think you getting that feedback is very important, and it is something that I'm considering
It
with
was
it, but
based on multi-year experience.
Yep,
It wasn't
no.
a single incident, let me just put it that way.
I understand that.
So I feel like, you know how I feel, and so I would suggest that maybe you, discuss it among yourselves and see how you feel. You can understand why your process makes sense, Paul. I don't feel it'll work for me.
Well, let me try and convince you.
No,
You're-
I don't think it's worth your time.
It's not. I think we should talk about the process between the three of us. I do. I think Jeff's made up his mind clearly. So I think, like you said, let's say we've got these three candidates. I've made it clear who I think my clear number one is Jeremy Marset.
But my clear number one is Jeremy Marset.
I'll second it.
Well, nobody's made a motion yet. Is that who your number one is as well? Is that?
Among the three of us, yeah, what's our opinion?
I think he's perfectly acceptable. Let's put it that way.
Okay, so I'll make a motion that we work on an offer of employment.
Yeah, I have the actual.
Do you have the actual
I have
motion?
the actual language here. Hang on one
Okay, thank
second.
you.
Here you go, George. You wanna read? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, exactly. I move that the Sherborn Select Board make a conditional offer of employment to Jeremy Marset for the position of Sherborn Town Administrator. This offer is conditioned upon the satisfactory background review and investigation by MRI and the successful negotiation of the terms of appointment by the Select Board.
Second.
Okay, it's-
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Nay. So motion carried, 3-1.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you to the select, to the
So,
commit.
yeah, I
selecting
actually,
committee. Okay, go ahead. I didn't want to steal
Yeah,
your
yeah,
script,
so-
Jeff.
So I would direct then, I suggest, I don't know if we need to vote, direct MRI to conduct the detailed background assessment that you do, Buzz, on, do we need to vote on that, you think? I think it's part of our contracts. I don't think we really.
No, I
need to
think it
vote.
was part of the motion that
So
they were going to be doing
We would like to
MRI to
have
do the.
that performed, obviously, for Jeremy. And my thank yous are, I want to thank all the candidates, actually. We actually had 23 candidates. We had 8 that we looked at in detail on the search committee, and 4 that we interviewed in the search committee, and 3 that we saw in select board. So I'd like to thank all 23 for their interest in the process. I want to thank Buzz and Bob and the MRI team for helping us get through this process and to help us attract good candidates in the first case and then help us winnow through and assess the candidates. I want to thank Vicki, who is the chair of the search committee, and there's a number of we had an 8-person search committee that went through a lot of work since, I don't even remember when it was, March or April, maybe February, looking at all the candidates. So all the search committee people, I want to thank you for your efforts and your due diligence in assessing the candidates. And lastly, I want to thank, on behalf of not just myself, but the select board, I want to thank Sherborn's employees and department heads, the residents who added comments in the process, and especially the residents who volunteer in town on so many committees and so many different boards that donate their services to the town. So hopefully this decision will serve you well and enhance your committee roles. And very last thank you goes to Diane, who has done a tremendous job throughout this process.
Hooray for Diane.
She still has hair. She hasn't pulled her hair out or anything, but it's been probably more stressful on her than any of us realize. So I think that we owe Diane a huge debt of gratitude to everything that she's done. So I have nothing else to say. And I just
I think
ask
you
for a
hit, you hit them,
motion,
you hit them all,
motion-
so.
motion to close the meeting.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, thank you, everyone at home, and thank you, everyone